Class 10. Unit 1. The chapter. A very old man with enormous wings. The author. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The light was weak, even at noon. When Pelayo was coming back to the house, it was hard for him to see what was moving and groaning in the rear of the courtyard. He had to go very close to see that it was an old man, a very old man. The man was lying face down in the mud. In spite of his tremendous efforts, the man couldn't get up, impeded by his enormous wings. Frightened by the sight, Pelayo ran to get Elisenda, his wife. She was putting compresses on their sick child. He took her to the rear of the courtyard. They both looked at the fallen body. The man was dressed like a rag picker. There were only a few faded hairs left on his bald skull, and very few teeth in his mouth. His pitiful condition seemed that of a drenched great-grandfather. This took away any sense of grandeur he might have had. His huge buzzard wings, dirty and half-plucked, were entangled in the mud. They looked at him so long and so closely that Pelayo and Elisenda very soon overcame their surprise. In the end they found him familiar. Then they dared speak to him. He answered in an incomprehensible dialect with a strong sailor's voice. They concluded that he was a lonely castaway from some foreign ship, wrecked by the storm. Then they called in a neighbor woman to see him. All she needed was one look to show them their mistake. "He's an angel," she told them. He must have been coming for the child, but the poor fellow is so old that the rain knocked him down. On the following day everyone knew that a flesh-and-blood angel was held captive in Pelayo's house. Pelayo watched over him all afternoon from the kitchen, armed with his bailiff's club. Before going to bed, he dragged him out of the mud and locked him up with the hens in the chicken coop. A short time afterward the child woke up without a fever and with a desire to eat. Then they felt magnanimous. They decided to put the angel on a raft with fresh water and provisions for 3 days, and leave him to his fate on the high seas. But when they went out into the courtyard at the first light of dawn, they found the whole neighborhood in front of the chicken coop having fun with the angel. The visitors were tossing him things to eat through the openings in the coop. It was as if he weren't a supernatural creature but a circus animal. The news of the captive angel spread with great rapidity. After a few hours, the courtyard had the bustle of a marketplace. The couple had to call in troops to disperse the mob. They got the idea of fencing in the yard and charging 5 cents for admission to see the angel. The curious came from far away. The most unfortunate invalids on earth came in search of health. Pelayo and Elisenda were happy with fatigue. In less than a week they had crammed their rooms with money. Still the line of pilgrims waiting their turn to enter reached beyond the horizon. The angel was the only one who took no part in his own act. He spent his time trying to get comfortable in his borrowed nest. At first, they tried to make him eat some mothballs. But he ate nothing but eggplant mush. His only supernatural virtue seemed to be patience. He was quite patient when the hens pecked at him, searching for the parasites in his wings. He was patient again when the cripples pulled out his feathers to touch their limbs with. He remained patient when even the most merciful threw stones at him. After all, they were only trying to get him to rise so that they could see him standing. It so happened that during those days there arrived in the town a traveling show. The main attraction was a woman who had been changed into a spider by a burst of thunder and lightning. The admission fee to see her was less than the fee to see the angel. So the people flocked to see her. They were also permitted to ask her all manner of questions about her absurd state. The owners of the house had no reason to lament. With the money they saved they built a 2-story mansion with balconies and gardens. It also had high netting so that crabs wouldn't get in during the winter, and iron bars on the windows so that angels wouldn't get in. Pelayo also set up a rabbit warren and gave up his job as a bailiff for good. Elisenda bought some satin pumps with high heels and many dresses of iridescent silk. The chicken coop was the only thing that didn't receive any attention. The dung-heap stench from the coop was turning the new house into an old one. At first, when the child learned to walk, They were careful that he did not get too close to the coop. But then they began to lose their fears and got used to the smell. Before the child got his second teeth, he'd gone inside the chicken coop to play, as the wires were falling apart. They both came down with the chicken pox at the same time. The doctor who took care of the child couldn't resist the temptation to listen to the angel's heart. He found so much whistling in the heart and so many sounds in the kidneys. What surprised him most, however, was the logic of his wings. They seemed so natural on that completely human organism. He couldn't understand why other people didn't have them too. When the child began school, the sun and rain had caused the collapse of the chicken coop. The angel went dragging himself about here and there like a stray dying man. He seemed to be in so many places at the same time. He could scarcely eat, and his eyes had also become so foggy that he went about bumping into posts. Pelayo threw a blanket over him and let him sleep in the shed. Only then did they notice that he had a temperature at night. They became alarmed, for they thought he was going to die. And yet he not only survived his worst winter, but seemed improved with the first sunny days. He remained motionless for several days in the farthest corner of the courtyard. At the beginning of December, some large, stiff feathers began to grow on his wings. They looked like the feathers of a scarecrow. One morning Elisenda was cutting some bunches of onions for lunch when a wind blew into the kitchen. Then she went to the window and found the angel in his first attempts at flight. These were so clumsy that he was on the point of knocking the shed down as he couldn't get a grip on the air. But then he did manage to gain altitude. Elisenda let out a sigh of relief, for herself and for him, when she watched him pass over the last houses. He was holding himself up in some way with the risky flapping of a senile vulture. She kept watching him even when she was through cutting the onions. She kept on watching until it was no longer possible for her to see him. He was no longer an annoyance in her life, but an imaginary dot on the horizon of the sea.